John Wilkes Booth. That's how I want to die. An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Awkward shifting was the only thing that punctuated the silence, as the three masons sat around the table, two of them in deep thought. The lack of windows and absence of a clock gave no context to the occupants to the passage of time, to the setting of the sun outside this awkward scene. Eventually, the silence became too loud, and one broke the silence. "Surely, you must be joking," Mary Todd said, not looking at her husband beside her, an uncharacteristic waver in her voice. Abraham reached out his right arm to comfort her, still stoic in his resolve. Johnson looked out across at his longtime compatriot, puzzled. Lakeland saw this expression on his face and replied to the question in it. "I want it to specifically be at the Ford Theatre. I'm still thinking about what play I would like to be on when it happens. Perhaps Othello, for the irony. And as we are all aware, young Booth is quite a strong Confederate, given his strong and oddly toxic rivalry with his brother. I like the idea of being killed by another person of note. Hopefully, my assassination will especially live in infamy. But Abraham, I don't understand why it must happen so soon, so suddenly. Our time on the side is yet to even fully begin." Looking across at Johnson, he knew the reason was obvious, but still needed to be said. "Our vision for this country, whatever it may have been, did not involve freeing them. Freeing them became a matter of necessity to defeat the rebels. Should we turn back now, we risk revolt, not just from them, but also from those of a lesser mind who find themselves sympathetic. That, alongside the seething southern rage, risks a return to the Civil War and our eventual demise. So we must appease everyone, by permitting them to be subjugated, as they doubtless ought to be. That cannot happen under my tenure. Too few would trust me given this apparent change of heart." "But your final legacy will be a lie," cried Todd. "The freer of slaves they will call you while spitting on your grave. Even the best among them will curse you for the burden of freedom you bestowed upon them." "Fine. Then let it be the greatest irony that I should look down upon from heaven. The last event of the honest Abraham Lincoln was a lie." A rapt knock broke the rising tension, as foreboding filled even Lincoln's heart. It was time. The sun had set, and Johnson smiled as they walked into his night. "Unlike you, Pops, I don't want to just die rich, I want to live rich," John griped. Feeling uneasy for having said that, he looked out across the lake, while his father sat across from him, evident disappointment in his eyes. "All those years working like a dog, and what did it get you? 2 ex-wives and a half-decent lake house? No, that can't be me." "Son, I'm not saying you should make the same mistakes I've made, but there is a better way than the gambling you are doing." The lake was oddly serene, which John took as an indicator that he should stay strong in his resolve. He turned to his left, on the wooden bench they were sharing, to face his father. "What you don't get, Pops, is that things aren't the same as when you were my age. Sure, it's a bit easier for me in some ways, but now a college degree doesn't mean anything. Maybe it would, if he actually had one in something valuable." And there it was, the same old tired flow. Look, John understood that maybe just studying economics and politics wasn't the best thing for his job prospects, especially given his just scraping by, but at least he wasn't doing something really stupid like being an arts major. Rent is up, healthcare is up, tuition is up. I paid for your tuition, but sure, go on. And as I was saying, competition is higher. In your day, it was rare for anyone to have a degree. Now everyone and their mother has one. That's why I need to do something different. That's why I'm working on the technology of the future. A fish, briefly flipping out of the water, broke the serenity, but just for a moment. His father looked away, exasperated, tired of the same old conversation. Look, son, I'm just worried about what happens when it all falls apart. Don't worry, it won't. They both turned as a fish eagle splashed in and took the flopping fish away. 1 month later, in the month of May 2022, Mr. America found his son on the floor. All right, just in a drunken stupor. Sighing, he reached down for his son's phone, where a lot of red was showing. It had fallen from an apparent 1 million to barely enough for a Big Mac. Some Squid Game token. At least, my way. I die the way I want to die. Being rich, he thought. Disgusted with himself, he retired to his room, where his own whiskey was awaiting him. Blessed Be was what you expected when you imagined a retirement village. On this particular day, the retirees were enjoying bingo, except this time around, for one Chanel, the stakes were particularly high. I-31 rang out across the small hall of 20 or so folks. Chanel felt a bump on her left arm as Rinko pointed at her scorecard. Hey, look, you have another one. Today you might actually get it for once. G73, a small sigh of relief. You see, dear viewer, Chanel had never won at bingo in all her 10 years at this particular retirement home. Then along came Grace. B21, Grace had appeared last month and had won nearly half of them since her arrival. She had also been eyeing her in a way that made her a little bit uncomfortable, in that she liked it. During one of her, dare I say, flirtations, Grace had told Chanel that she would win at bingo because Grace willed it. In response, Chanel had demanded that they bet on it. Chanel wanted Grace to not speak to her for a week, and Grace, well, there was only one prize she wanted. I-69, the brief juvenile chuckles were interrupted by someone reluctantly shouting, Bingo! Grace left the table as everyone clamoured around Chanel, astonished at this once-in-a-decade occurrence. Before the throng had fully engulfed her, young 81-year-old Grace had turned to give her a wink and stick out her tongue. A foreshadowing. 3 hours later and the sun down, Chanel was laying down under the cover, her legs tenser than she knew they could still be, with Grace standing at the foot of the bed. Relax. I'm quite good at this. And without further ado, Grace's face went under the blanket. I'm going to need you to give me consent. Ugh, you young kids. Yes, Grace, go ahead. And there was no further warning. Now, dear viewer, I don't quite have the words to describe what Grace was experiencing in that moment. But, by God, whenever she describes it to me in our walks around heaven, it sounds better than anything I'd ever experienced. So, the story goes that at some point in what felt like a short eternity,
Grace paused and said, "Now you see, this is why I keep winning at bingo. Have the announcer around my tongue. Think about the benefits you can give me, friend, while I go for round 2. Chanel's last words were, "I could do this until I die." "You just might," Grace said jokingly. She snuck out of her room an hour later, leaving Chanel silent, presumably in shell shock. The next day, the ambulance came and pronounced Chanel dead. Cause of death? Unknown. Although the wet patch gave away the usual story.